Coming to you from Brick House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, Earth Day is this weekend, and a marine biologist will make a case for optimism. And exploring secret Brooklyn, little-known gems in this giant borough. Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Ross Tuttle. Ashley Ford is still recovering, but we hope to see her back soon. Today, the two black men who were arrested for trespassing in a Starbucks in Philadelphia last week spoke about their ordeal on morning TV. The event sparked a lot of backlash against the corporate giant and anger in general about all too often criminalization of blacks for behavior that doesn't even register when done by whites, and what has become known as retail racism. Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson has called for a day of sensitivity training for employees in May in their 8,000 stores across the country. Some are calling it a smart response, others are calling it a cynical marketing campaign. Whatever you want to call it, it's an important opportunity to reflect on where we spend our dollars. I have my own reasons for not going to Starbucks when I have a choice. It's important that a message is sent, though, that this kind of thing won't be tolerated. Calling for a boycott is extreme in my belief, but if you're doing it because you think their coffee sucks or breakfast sandwiches taste like plain food, that's another matter. As I've said, there have been a lot of responses, and one by Brookliner.com has been to identify black-owned coffee shops here in Brooklyn, 36 and counting, in case people want to support them instead of a corporate faceless giant. And now Eric Adams says he'll visit some of those shops, that's Borough President Eric Adams, in the coming weeks to encourage people to know and support these local mom and pops. We have on the phone right now co-owners of a couple mom and pops, Bittersweet in Fort Greene and Sit and Wonder in Prospect Heights. Lucien and Gemma Redwood, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Hi, Ross.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good. So you guys, Bittersweet, it's such a great neighborhood institution. Always a line out the door when I ride my bike by it in the morning. What do you guys think makes it such an institution in the neighborhood? What's important about it for the neighborhood?
We've been there for quite a long time, and we've just built up a relationship with the community, I think, and we're happy to be a part of the neighborhood. When
this story first broke about what happened in Starbucks in Philadelphia, did it register much? Did you hear about it, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, I read about it a few days ago, and then I started reading about it a little bit more online. And my response was, I was shocked, really. I was shocked that something like this could happen in Starbucks. But then again, cutting through the layers, again, it's two black men, being profiled.
Right.
So that to me is a problem, not just with Starbucks, but that is a problem in this country, period.
Sure. And Lucien, you said this has happened to you on a number of occasions, unfortunately.
Yes, when you talk about like retail, I'm like older than I'm a little older than these guys, but throughout my life I've always had people following me around shops, and it's just the feel of that, and people looking at you in stores with that look. So it's something that I think that everybody in this country needs to be aware of. That that there is this profiling, and there is this layer of prejudice that still exists.
Right. And so, what did you think about then Eric Adams' statement that he was going to come around and visit some of the black-owned coffee shops in Brooklyn, and people identifying some of them to try to support the local mom and pops?
I think it's a great idea. Not just being black-owned, but just being small business. Right. Because operating a business in Brooklyn in this climate is tough. And, as everything goes up and up, rent and, wages go up, it just becomes harder for small businesses. Like Bittersweet and Sit and Wonder, that is the true essence of a mom and pop. It's owned by me and my wife. So by having Eric say that he'll come around, it's a positive thing, because people will realize that, yes, there are alternatives to Starbucks. There are small-owned businesses in Brooklyn, coffee shops.
And if people don't support businesses like ours, they will go away. Small and pop shops will go away.
Right. And ones like yours, which certainly have a lot better breakfast sandwiches than the ones at Starbucks. I'm a little bit biased though, but the ham and cheese croissant is out of this world at Bittersweet. Well, hey, you guys, thanks so much for coming on in such short notice. I really appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts, and look forward to seeing you guys in the neighborhood.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
All right, take care. Coming up, 2 conversations, one with a marine biologist who will make a case for optimism when it comes to the environment, and he'll also talk about an effort to get more women involved in the climate change discussion. And then co-authors who will tell us about Brooklyn's hidden gems. Stay tuned. Right now, we have an environmental protection agency that wants to roll back regulations for auto emissions, the Clean Air Act, et cetera. An interior secretary who wants to drill offshore, any shore of the United States. And fossil fuel companies are re-energized, excuse the pun. The United States has backed out of the Paris Climate Treaty. There's a garbage patch largely made up of plastics floating in the Pacific that some are saying is 3 times the size of France. Okay, maybe it isn't that big, but we really don't know for sure. Nevertheless, plastics and other pollutants in the ocean are a problem, and so is climate change. Just ask people dealing with the aftermath of hurricanes, mudslides, and forest fires. And that's just scratching the surface of our pollution problems. But our next guest considers herself an Earth optimist. No, she's not a climate change skeptic. She's a Brooklyn-based environmental scientist, marine biologist, who studies the impacts of climate change on sea life. She also works to empower women and girls to get more involved in environmental science and the conservation surrounding climate change and what can be done to promote conservation. Since the 48th annual Earth Day is this Sunday, we thought we'd invite her on the show to talk about her work on both fronts. Alicia Pérez-Porro, thank you for coming on 112BK.
Thank you for inviting me.
So can you just tell me real quick, what is Earth optimism?
So Earth Optimism is a movement around climate change, but with an optimistic perspective. We are always hearing stories about climate change and how basically the world is going to end and we are all going to die. And this is a whole new perspective because there are a lot of people working to fix climate change effects and prevent these effects to go further. And all these people are actually having some success. And this is the movement that is sharing all of these successful stories around climate change to make us all feel better and to still have hope, because there is still hope. Right. There's a lot of things that we can do, and there's a lot of things that we can try to fix in a sense.
So not to give us false hope, and these are scientists who are part of this movement, right? And people who are coming up with solutions.
Yes.
How does it tie into your work? And I mean, tell me, because it sounds like you're coming up with some solutions, and you can tell us, I don't think I mentioned in the introduction that you work with sea sponges.
Yes. So as you said, I am a marine biologist, and I work at the Smithsonian, at the National Museum of Natural History, with marine sponges. And what I do is that I use genomic tools to study how climate change affects these marine sponges and the environment where they live. And in my research, or not exactly my research, but some colleagues' research, what they are discovering is that actually sponges are not doing that bad with climate change, and corals are really suffering the most, but sponges are coping with climate change effects, and this is leading sponges in some reefs, like Caribbean reefs, to take over the reef. So in Caribbean reefs, some research is showing that they are switching from being coral-dominated to being sponge-dominated. So this is a little bit of an optimistic story, because at least sponges are not all of them dying.
Right.
And
so we talked on the phone. I don't know if we can't qualify to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing, and sponges are kind of winning in maybe the climate change situation. But you're finding ways that maybe you can pull some of the genetic material from the sponges and maybe help kind of introduce that to other species? Is that? So
this is not exactly what I do. Okay. But yeah, this could be a possibility. Right. Yeah, this is, I don't know if you hear this technique, CRISPR, it's being all over the news, how you can modify genetically organisms. And we are not doing this with the sponges, but there are some researchers that they are thinking about doing this with corals, for instance, and they are like, some corals can be resistant to climate change effects, and they are like trying to find out why, and if they can genetically genetically modify corals and transplant them back to the ocean. So we can have genetically modified corals growing in the ocean that we know that they're going to survive climate change. So, and what I do is I try to identify the genes that make sponges resilient to climate change. And I do basic research, but my basic research can help other researchers that do more application in maybe, I don't know, the thing that we were dreaming about, that maybe they can get these genes that I am describing and modify some other organisms, or these genes can be the key for other organisms, so you can know if, oh, this organism is going to survive or this one is not going to survive based on if they have these genes for resilience activated or not.
And so this gets into a basic issue for me when we talk about climate change and the environment issue, and where science is moving ahead because it has to and because we have to. But it does nothing alone to kind of deal with human behavior. I should mention, and we spoke off camera about the environmental activist who killed himself this past weekend, and the notice that he left behind was his despondency over the way that he felt we were going with this administration and just with the environmental movement. He wanted to make a very bold statement with his death. But also he felt like people weren't sacrificing enough. And so I know, but you work on that part of things too, but trying to motivate people to get more involved. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I didn't know about this guy committing suicide. It was a total shock when I found out, and it's a really sad story. And certainly there are a lot of reasons to be sad and to be a pessimist about how things are going, especially if we take into account the administration that the U.S. have right now. But I think that related to Earth optimism, what I usually say to people that they ask me, what can we do, is, and I think that I share this quote with you over the phone, is nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And I think that part of the pessimism is because we try to do everything, and we cannot do everything because A, not everything is under our control, and B, if you try to do everything, then you are completely unhappy. So just try to pick a cause and stick to that cause. And this cause can be something really, really simple, like I'm going to try to do the groceries with a fabric bag instead of a plastic bag every day. And once you have this incorporated in your routine, then you can pick a second cause that can be, on Wednesdays, I'm going to bike to work. And little by little, with time, you are going to have a more sustainable life, and you are probably going to inspire others. And I like to share these stories, especially to young people, because, I mean, they have a lot of life, so they can do a lot of things, and they can incorporate to their routines a lot of things. And I really think that it's just a matter of trying to live a more sustainable life. And this is certainly something that everybody can try to do.
Sure, sure. And you also are working in the realm of, as you mentioned, or maybe I mentioned, trying to get women and girls more involved in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math, more engaged in the conversation. Why is that? I mean, what have you been seeing in your experience being a scientist?
So I identify myself as a woman, and I've been in science since, I don't know, a long time ago. And as a woman in science, you face a lot of challenges, and you face disadvantages. And this is, if we relate this with climate change, this is something that not only is unfair, it is also something that is not beneficial for anyone, because we need all the voices, and all the voices matter. And right now, in leadership positions, making decisions for climate change, there's a sad lack of women in there. So we are missing 50% of the population in this world. There are women, and I became this passionate advocate for women and girls in science, because I really believe that our voices matter and we need to use them, and we have a lot of things to say, and it's not better or worse, it's just different. It's a different perspective.
Sure.
And it's important.
Well, and I also read in some of the literature with Homeward Bound, which is one of the organizations, right, that tries to get women and girls involved in the sciences and talking about climate change and being part of the conversation, that it is women around the world who usually bear the brunt, at least of the immediate impacts of climate change when there are droughts, for example, right?
Yeah,
Women
that's
who
correct.
who are the ones who are collecting water in drought-stricken places, right?
Yeah.
Having to walk greater distances. So what was that some of the inspiration as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that we discovered, but that was a case study during our time in Antarctica with Homeward Bound, is that women suffer more the consequences of climate change effects than men, especially in rural areas. That means that these women have also the key in their communities to fight climate change. And one case study that we did was this community of women in Morocco that they convinced all the men to stop cutting the trees around the village and to start using solar ovens. And that was an example of how women leadership in rural communities, the most affected ones by the effects of climate change, can be true leaders to fight climate change if you give them a voice.
You know, to get back to the oceans, because that's your area of research, I wonder, one thing, I think there was a report out, in a lot comes out around Earth Day, right, about our what's going on here. I mentioned the big garbage patch in the Pacific. There was something else I saw about all this effluent that's going in and creating these dead zones in the ocean. I think the Earth Day Network which is maybe kind of an offshoot or a website that's related to Earth Day. I'm not quite sure what they're targeting plastic, and our over reliance on plastic and how that's finding, and microplastic and fibers are finding their way into the ocean. What are you seeing there? I mean, I don't know if you examine that space at all. I'm sure you're aware of it, but what in that? How can we look at that and not feel, concerned and pessimistic?
Well, that's a good one, because I'm slightly pessimistic on this one.
No. You're supposed to give us hope.
No, there is hope. There is hope. Plastic is a huge problem. It's a huge problem in the ocean, and it's really sad because we were in Antarctica for a month, and we saw a lot of plastic in this remote area of the world without a civilization. We saw an incredibly amount of plastic, and that was really sad. And also there are a lot of studies that they say that in a couple of years plastic is going to be more abundant than fishes in the ocean. So we need to start being conscious about it, and we need to start taking action against this. So something as simple as stop using straws every time that you go to a restaurant. Just say, I don't want the straw. Or you can even buy on Amazon, you can buy a metallic straw that you can reuse and you can put in the dishwasher to clean it. So these little details actually make a lot of difference, and we really need to start cutting the use of plastics.
I really appreciate you coming in. As we approach Earth Day, it's great to hear this message and great to have some words of hope and optimism. So thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
Do you ever feel like you're getting bored of Brooklyn? How many times can you go to Coney Island, Prospect Park, or Smorgasburg? Okay, a lot, but it's easy to get stuck in a routine and feel like you've explored all there is to explore in this diverse, vibrant, strange, innovative borough. But chances are you haven't. And if you're looking for inspiration, we've got a couple of folks who can give it. They're the authors of this book, Secret Brooklyn, which tells where you can see the world's smallest Torah, church robots, and the world's oldest subway tunnel, and Hobbit doors. Hobbit doors! We welcome Michelle Young. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Augustin Pasquet. Thanks for coming on 112BK.
Thank you for having us.
So we were just talking briefly off camera. Michelle, I asked you, how this sort of all got started. Can you tell me the origin story of this book?
Yeah, so this publisher, Zhonglei, is from France, but they publish books in English all around the world, all written by locals. And we had previously written a book called New York Hidden Bars and Restaurants. Oh, cool. And we knew they had a book, Secret New York, and we said to the publisher, you really should have something about Brooklyn. It's really hot around the world right now. It used to be its own city. Right. Let's do it. So he said, if you have enough places, we can do that.
So Augustin, you guys got to be Brooklyn explorers for this book, right? I'm imagining that you may have known some of these places already, but you got to dig a little bit. How was that?
Yeah, exactly. And it was very exciting because we had just moved to Brooklyn maybe like a year or two before. No, a year before we started this project. And so this was really like a crash course learning Brooklyn. And so that was very, very exciting for us. And while we did know approximately like 25% of the locations in this book, we got to learn and discover and explore like many, many more. So it was a very, very exciting time. Yeah.
So what qualifies kind of as offbeat, in your book when you are looking for places that maybe are little known gems? What do you look for?
In our company, Untapped Cities, we say that we only publish things that make people go, what? A question mark, exclamation. Mm-hmm. And I think that applies to the places in this book. We really wanted residents themselves to be very surprised. And when we give talks about this, we do like a quiz as we go through the presentation. And oftentimes, most people don't know where these places are.
And it's a good question. Like we gave a presentation to the Guide Association of New York City, and these guys are very knowledgeable. They are great, etc. But they were caught off guard on some of these locations. And to Michelle's point, this guide was really thought as a guide for residents more than for visitors.
What were some of those places that made you go, what?
Well, the Hobbit doors, I think, is a very good one.
I was going to ask about the Hobbit tours. I'm very excited about the Hobbit tours. I always look, like to feel like I'm living in a shire at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the border of Gowanus and Carroll Gardens area, there's a street called Dennett Place. It has all sorts of secrets because it's spelled differently and all throughout history. Some people actually think it might have been Bennett Place and misspelled. But along this whole street on two sides, there's a main door after you go up a staircase, but underneath it is a matching miniature door. And all the doors are designed and painted differently throughout the street. So it's just kind of a really funny one-off thing that's I've seen it nowhere else in New York City, actually. And I got to go inside. So once you go inside, you understand exactly that there are no hobbits walking through the front door.
I was going to ask if it wasn't
yeah, there are a few steps you go down and you make a turn, and there's a full-size bedroom down there.
Right. Well, a little disappointed that there are no real-life hobbits there, but I got to go check that out. What were some other things that were really exciting?
I think you mentioned it in the introduction, but Torah Animal World is quite a unique place because it's a museum where you see animals. It's like a taxidermy, and these are all the animals of the Torah that are in this one museum. And it's a museum run by a rabbi who's absolutely great. And when I went there to take photos, I was the only guy, the only person there in the whole museum, and he played this video. A good half of it was in Hebrew, and so he asked me if I spoke Hebrew, and I was like, I don't speak Hebrew. And so I was alone, surrounded by these taxidermy, lions and stuff, and listening to a video in Hebrew. So it was a bit of a unique place. And then as I went to see the world's smallest Torah, which is in this museum, there was a Hasidic Jewish father and his son, and he was quite confused by my presence, I would say, because I was just played tennis. I was in my sports outfit, etc. And he turned back to me and he was like, "Are you Jewish?" And no, I'm not Jewish. He was very confused. And then he turns back 5 minutes later and he's like, "Is your mother Jewish?" I'm like, "No, she's not Jewish." So what are you doing here?
He was trying to convert you.
Yeah.
But so when we're talking the world's smallest Torah, how small was this Torah?
It's about 2.5 inches tall. You have to use a magnifier glass to read it.
And were they praying from that Torah when you walked in?
No, they were not playing. They were really just showing it as an artifact.
But we were told that they actually use it once a week.
Where did it come from?
It was made specifically as a collector's item.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so, I asked you before we began taping about a Dead Horse Bay, which I understand is there, which is that old beach that I guess they used to cremate horses there or something. That's why it's called Dead Horse Bay. Yeah. And all those old, it also used to be a landfill, so all this stuff is kind of bubbling to the surface, like these old bottles and kind of cool things that people find there. So, and that's a real interesting spot I know people can go to. What were some of the other, places that were like that one could maybe make an outing to?
Yeah. One of the great trips I went on was on a parrot safari.
Oh, okay.
And there's a man who gives free tours once a month of these Argentinian green parrots that came here maybe in the 60s, 70s.
Well, I think we spoke about him once on this show. We've been wanting to get him on.
Yeah,
It's a
so
really
it's
cool
a fabulous tour, and to realize that these birds live here all year round, right in Greenwood Cemetery and in more mid-southern Brooklyn. Another amazing place is a grocery store in Marine Park that's literally frozen since 1939, but it's still run. So a World War II veteran, John Cortese, runs that store, and he's maybe 95, 96 right now.
So I'm confused. It's frozen?
It's frozen in time, meaning
I
like
see.
the decor hasn't changed. He's still using real weights.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's wooden plank floors that are kind of twisted and tin ceilings.
But it's not commodities from that time, like they've updated.
No,
like they
no.
have.
But I mean, essentially, they're like, you know, fresh fruits and things. So it's it still has that old school feel. So it's a really
when you
wonderful
walk
place.
in, he greets you and say, "Hey, welcome to
1939
or something." It's really fun. And when the power broke down, when there was a power shutdown the few years,
He was running off gas.
He was
so
running.
He could still operate
he didn't need electricity because his scales and everything were just like weights. So, yeah.
Perfect. He didn't have an automated cash register, right?
Yeah,
He was just
exactly.
using an abacus or something.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. So the book has been out for how long now?
Maybe 9 months, came out last July.
What's the response been? And have people been writing to you with other things that maybe aren't in the book that you should include in the next volume?
Yeah, I mean, people have been really excited. We've been presenting it to a lot of residents. So as Augustin said, people are happy to be surprised, I think, and happy to have places to discover. I think there are definitely places that we want to add next time. We'll see. Yeah.
And so what are there? And also tell me about your website, the website you guys run, Untapped Cities.
Yeah, it's a website to help New Yorkers rediscover their city. So we've been around since 2009, and we are a web magazine and a tour company for locals. So we do quirky things from going to see what the remnants of Penn Station are inside the current station, to the abandoned hospitals on Ellis Island. All the tours are, of course, run by locals, and over 90% of the people who come are from New York City.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. One other question I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Are there any hidden gems in this neighborhood that we could walk out our door and see in Fort Greene?
One that's very close by is the former Paramount Theater that's in Long Island University. That's right now a basketball court.
And that's being converted back into a theater, actually.
Yeah, but it's one of the grand movie palaces from the 20s and 30s.
Yeah,
and
I've been in there. It's a little strange, an odd experience when you walk in and you see this sort of, all the velvet and the the red and ruby colored, and then all of a sudden there's a basketball court there.
And there's actually even like an organ that comes out of the stage, and it's a Wurlitzer organ. There are very
by stage
few.
we mean basketball court.
Yeah, that's true.
There's also remnants of the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel that are around here. I know Bob Diamond used to give these amazing tours where
Does
you
he do
go
those anymore? Like
No,
they put those barricades up and people are going
down the
plunging
manhole.
down in the middle of Atlantic Avenue.
Unfortunately he was shut down, but there's a restaurant that discovered some parts as they were expanding a speakeasy downstairs. So it's under the restaurant Chez Moi in a place called Le Boudoir.
On Atlantic Avenue.
And there's like a former coal room that they've refurbished.
Right,
and so that's an amazing spot around here.
Well, that's great. Well, so in like the 30 seconds we have left, and I referenced this at the beginning, and maybe this is just me, that people do tend to get stuck in their routine. How would you encourage people to kind of break out of that in a way to really explore their surroundings, because it seems like there's so much that's untapped?
Two things. When you walk somewhere, drop your phone and look around, and maybe if you go home, if you go to work, get off the subway station just one stop before and walk a little more and take a path that you don't usually take and make an effort to look up.
That's great advice. Okay, well, thank you guys for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week to talk about housing issues from the Kushner companies to NYCHA, solar powering Puerto Rico, and child welfare in the city. Hope you can join us. Have a great weekend and happy Earth Day.